Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to discuss what happened when I was engaged in sort of an internet discussion. It's sort of an interesting story. So basically what happened was there was a comment, and I made this statement about something. And someone picked up on it, they asked me more about it, and then the tone of the discussion, it was very much, they were questioning pretty much everything that I was saying, which, and I had answers for it, so that didn't bother me at all, because, I'd thought about this, I'd done my research, and I was able to give them answers for everything they asked for. But there came to a point in the conversation, because I was talking about some scientific stuff, and I was having to explain really basic concepts, correlation doesn't equal causation, stuff like that. And they mentioned that they work in science, and I didn't leave this comment because I thought it might not have been sportsman-like to do it, but I was thinking to myself, you work in science, but I'm having to explain these basic concepts to you. It didn't really seem to make, it actually did make a lot of sense, but only if I saw them as either ignorant, which I didn't think that at all. I thought they were actually knew perfectly well what they were doing. What I suspect was going on instead was that they thought that they could catch me out not knowing science, and even if it was intellectually dishonest to bring up a certain point because it wasn't a scientifically sound point, they thought that if I didn't know that it wasn't a scientifically sound point, then it would go. Another thing that happened in the conversation was the course of fair play, that the fair discussion, that seemed to break down a lot. They were using a lot of ha-ha and oh, that made me laugh and stuff like that, and it was very sarcastic, I found. And I thought, if I were in your position and this was a discussion that we were having, I wouldn't find anything about this amusing. If I didn't like it, I'd probably find it disturbing, maybe, but I wouldn't find it amusing. And I thought the fact that somebody needed to mock it dishonestly to make it appear like a weaker argument instead of just letting their own arguments stand on their own merits, it was very interesting. I mean, that's not the way you take down an argument. And so the whole thing was a bit of a circus, really. I mean, I felt like I conducted myself pretty well and pretty gracefully, all things considered. But they reached a point where they realized that they weren't getting me on the grounds of logic or science. They weren't getting me on the grounds of trying to make me feel like it wasn't, whatever I was saying wasn't good enough. And so they started attacking my character. And that's kind of where I draw the line. And I think this was probably maybe the best thing that I did in the conversation, to be honest. And the best thing I probably have done in any conversation was to end it on that basis. I have set myself a boundary now that when I go into a discussion, particularly one that has the potential to get heated, is that as soon as attacks on character and misrepresentations of arguments start getting thrown around, that's when I leave. And some people might say, well, if you leave, then you have the opportunity for the person to go, well, I guess I must be right then because you won't answer to it. No. I think now, because I used to think that, but I think now, if you can leave a conversation, then you've actually probably won the conversation, because your argument now stands for itself. You no longer need to defend it. It stands for itself. And the fact that someone has resorted to crossing a conversational boundary to try and get you to step away and discredit you is a sign that their argument isn't good enough. So it's the same thing that I was saying before, is trying to discredit the other person's argument instead of raising one of your own that's worth its weight, in gold. So it was very interesting. It was a very much a learning experience. I'm not saying I was perfect, like I did, make sort of underhand shots that were missed, because it was a bit of a political discussion. And I remember at one point they said, I want to make things easier for this group of people who are, coming up in the next generation. And I said to them, well, that's wonderful. I want to make things easier for everybody who's coming up in the next generation. And when you give rights and make things easier to one group, you have to make sure that you don't oppress another group in that endeavor. And that was sort of a bit of a backhanded insult, I suppose, which wasn't good on my part. But it seemed to go over their heads, so and that probably wasn't good either. But that is what it is. It was a learning experience, and I think had I been a bit less mature and a few years younger, I wouldn't have conducted myself in such a way that had that sort of self-control. I might have just resorted to the same tactics that they did. And I think I find it a bit easier to know that despite the fact that they may have gotten the last word, because I shut down the conversation and said, I'm not talking to you anymore about this, despite the fact that they probably did end up getting the last word, I don't think that anybody who would come along and look back on what's been written would say that they conducted themselves fairly, or that they conducted themselves in a way that was convincing. So that was just something I learned, you know. This is just sort of a rambling. I don't know why I'm saying it here. I guess it was just something interesting to talk about. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.